Welcome back, everybody. Episode 44, Light Warriors Unleashed podcast. And I've got a beautiful guest to share with you today. Her name is Rosa Hope, and she is an astrophysicist who's also like a spiritual guide. And in this episode, we dive into the scientific side, the dynamics of being in the scientific world, and how the commonality between science and spirituality come together. We lean into sacred geometry. We talk about intuitive pathways. We talk about purpose-led life. And we dive into all different kinds of meat in connection with like being a human in this experience and how to be more a human and how that aligns in our spiritual past and what this looks like. We also dive in a little bit to Dolores Cannon's work because she is certified in her QHTT, like hypnosis type of therapy. And it was just such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And when I first jumped on to the Zoom with Rosa, I was like, I feel like I know you. And as we move through the podcast recording together, I understand why, because of the fact that we have so many similarities in our pathway, like the way that we purposefully chose to do things in life and to hold control and to not believe, we'll say, or our inquisitive selves move through the world. And it was just such a cool experience to chat with her very scientifically about certain things and how it pertains to this human experience and how all of us can move through this evolution, this expansion in our world. So I am just so grateful and cannot wait to share with you, Rosa. And one of the things I just realized was like, oh man, this is episode 44. I should have asked her about her take on numerology because she touched on it like a little bit in hindsight to what we were actually speaking to. And I'm like, oh, it would have been cool. But 44, baby. Here we go. Light Warriors Unleashed with Rosa Hope. Okay, this is going to be so fun. And Rosa, I'm just so grateful that you are here today to share your like brilliant light. And I'm excited to find out where we're going to go in this landscape because I know that we have multiple pathways we could speak to, but it's going to be really fun just to see how this moves through us. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Thank you for having me. I'm definitely excited to share like anything and everything. So obviously we're not going to cover everything today, but you did say to me that one of the things you found the most interesting about my background is that I'm a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So, people always wonder, how did I end up moving into spiritual circles when I come from such a hard science background?
Yeah, so tell us about
it. Right. So the answer is actually not that complicated. So ever since I was a kid, I always had these really deep existential questions anyway. Mm-hmm. So, like nature, reality, what is all this? Why are we here? Et cetera, et cetera. And I was a big nerd and a bookworm and good at math. So like science seemed really natural, but I was also, checking out books at the library about ESP and ghosts and stuff like that. So I had it's all sort of fabric of reality stuff, right? And absolutely, to be quite honest with you, this division between science and spirituality is a product of modernity. This is new. Yes. This is new. So even if you only go back 200 or 300 years, science and spirituality were woven together because they're really asking the same questions ultimately. Yeah. In modern times, we separate them mostly because they have very different tools of the trade. Right. So the tools we use for science have gotten really specialized, and the tools we use for spirituality in many ways are the same as they've been for thousands of years. It's just we like to forget about them or suppress them and then rediscover them, and then forget about them or repress them and then like rediscover them. So, but they're seen as being kind of two different worlds, and that is new, and it's something that I am happy to throw away. So here I am. I'm a trained scientist. I'm a PhD candidate in astrophysics. So I'm active. I have published papers. I'm working on paper right now. So it's like I'm still very much in that world. But I also actively work with clients doing spiritually focused hypnosis. I do workshops. I'm a facilitator. I'm running an integration program right now, a spiritual integration program. So both of these things are really important to me and have very high value in my life. I really value science and what it can teach us, and I really value spirituality and how it can help us human better, if you know what
Yes.
I'm saying. So
Yes.
that's kind of the focus of my professional practice, my professional spiritual practice anyway, is how do we human better? How do we do this
Yeah.
better?
Yes.
How do we live up to our potential? How
Mm.
do we become more loving, more compassionate? How do we get into alignment with our purpose? You know, these are deep, age-old questions that are very tied to who we are and what we are. And of course, they talk to things like the afterlife too, like where did we come from? Where do we go when we die? All of these are these like quintessential questions that humans have been asking since the first time they looked up at the night sky and saw this shining universe in front of them. And so I think in a way, some people have that experience and it moves them to become more spiritual. Some people, they have that experience and they turn into astrophysicists, you know, but at the end of the day, the kernel is the same. Like the reason is actually the same.
Yes.
And I just don't like being put in a box, I guess. So
Yeah.
I just follow both paths.
Yeah, I know. And it's so like, and it's very interesting. Like I have a lot of clients that are very grounded, helping people from the human side, like you just said, understand from the scientific portion. Because if we look at the dynamics of everything on Earth, it's all sacred geometry, and sacred geometry is also alchemy when we talk about it in magic or medicinal, like, and transmutation, and you know, light codes and all of that is done through a vibration of sacred geometry. So just like you said, it's all the same in the palette of it, but it's just the dimensional almost energy that we hold in both. And wherever some people are super science based, which you obviously see in the world you play in, that they may not believe in God or in divinity or in spirituality, but they actually practice it to some degree through their scientific movement. That's correct to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I would say that's true. The other distinction, as I made before, is the tools of the trade.
Right.
So, for example, if you are of a very sort of spiritual bent and you're interested in things like sacred geometry and ideals, the ideals of form, which sacred geometry is trying to elicit,
Yeah.
you just use different tools. So you're learning
Right.
about things like Kabbalah, and you're learning about you know, nesting platonic solids, and like you said, alchemy and other esoteric traditions really use these because the forms themselves are imbued with meaning.
Right.
And you're learning the meaning. Well, like numerology and everything, it's all tied together in its own, in sort of a metaphysical science, shall we say. But it's about meaning.
Yeah.
So you're actually going through and learning about how we interpret these different forms and how they talk to us about the basis of reality from a more from a perspective of ideals or ontology. Like we're thinking about the purpose of existence and how it builds on itself. So it's really a philosophical pursuit. However, if you want to really connect with like what I would call like boots on the ground sacred geometry, all you have to do is go to a natural history museum. And I'll tell you why. If you've ever gone to see a minerals exhibition where they're showing really large crystals of, you know, I mean, not just crystals of like quartz and stuff, but other things like sulfides and all these other things. When you go see these huge crystals made of these pure chemical compounds, you notice that they have different shapes that they take. So some look like this traditional kind of quartz crystal shape. Some look like hair. Some of them make sort of these like parallel lines and bars or like hexagons. You've seen what I'm talking about. But what you're actually seeing is the structure of the molecules, because it's a pure chemical compound. You're seeing the structure of the molecules when it stacks on top of itself over and over. The structure of those molecules is then seen like on a macro scale. So that's the reason why crystals have different shapes. It's because they're actual chemical compounds, and the way those bonds shape the molecules gives them that shape. So it's arising naturally from this tiny structure, and you're getting to learn more about its molecular structure by looking at this big crystal. It's sacred geometry in action. You know what I'm saying? So it's very real, it's very physical. and crystals are just a good way of seeing it because they're highly organized.
Right.
So like they're sort of clicked together like Legos in a way. And a lot of molecules, there's only certain ways they can fit together. That's why you get crystals in the first place. But this is the type of stuff that you might not think about unless you have studied like chemistry or molecular physics or something like that, because you just don't know the mechanisms behind it. But I tell people all the time that I was a much stranger person after my physics degree than I was before it, because I learned so much about how matter interfaces, and how the laws of nature are so well organized and can be described with a lot of the same mathematical tools, showed me that there is just beautiful structure underlying physical reality.
Huge.
And I think in spirituality nowadays, a lot of people kind of like to flush physical reality down the toilet. They're like, it's not real. I don't want to worry about it. What a hassle it is to be physical. And I'm totally on the other side of this, where I'm like, oh no, this is where our work lies. This is what we're here to do. You are in the right place. Like, do not tell yourself those stories. Like, you're here to engage with this. And the difference between hard science and spirituality really is that in hard science, the only things we can measure are physical because the tools are physical, right? So we're using labs and we're using detectors that measure physical stuff like atoms and energy, that is being moved between atoms and photons and things like that. But it's like with material stuff, you're only going to be able to detect other material stuff.
Right.
So we're never going to be able to sort of peer behind the veil using the tools of physics, for example, because the tools are made of the stuff you're trying to measure. You can't like measure something that is of a different substance, shall we say, if you're using these like material things to do it. So in physics and in chemistry and in engineering, like we have this sense of like the hard sciences and the soft sciences, and that's kind of denigrating, but it really shouldn't be. By soft science, we generally mean social science, which means instead of using like lab equipment to detect something, you are observing patterns in human behavior or observing patterns in nature and trying to learn from that. Spirituality is ultimately a soft science in a way, where it's like we want to learn from people's experiences. We're trying to collect data in a different way. And unfortunately, all that data is subjective. So hard scientists will often say soft science is like, we don't even know how to work in that world. Everything's subjective. How do you even know what's real? And it's like, okay, guys, like it's because we need this data collection. And there are scientists, not physicists, they tend to be sociologists, psychologists, people like that, that are working in this realm now. And even if they're not exploring how things work, like how reincarnation works or how ESP works, even if there's no way to explain the mechanism of it, they can at least look at the phenomenology of it, which is to say, what does it do? If I can't tell you how it's happening, I can at least study what it's doing. What does it do to the people who experience it? What does it do to society when more people are like learning how to meditate? It's exploring like what the impact of it is and what it does and how it works is something we sort of leave to physicists and engineers, but they're very limited by the tools available.
Because they can't measure the things that are so not in physical form.
Right.
I love the conversation you brought, because I've been saying this quite a bit, over the last few months, even especially like we have the gift of the ego to the spirit, as a spirit is the gift to the ego. And we can even move that into this physical human experience is the gift to the spirit who comes down to learn, as the spirit is the gift to the human form to be able to help guide us in connection of the deep rooted, connections, peace, love, joy, and all the juiciness that we move through. So I love that you brought this up. And this is kind of like, I've been stating this into the world. Our objective isn't to go, live on a mountaintop away from all these people, learn to be a breatharian and completely disconnect from life. Our goal is, how do we bring both of these worlds together and move within that? And your integration program probably. And I want you to speak to this because I think there's some really amazing meat in there.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been thinking about this very recently. There is a quote by Chogyam Trungpa, which I actually have on deck because I was just using this in my program. Let me see if I can find it here. I'm gonna pull it up.
And it's really actually fun while you do that. I just finished teaching on Monday of this week an integration masterclass about the human and the spirit, and about the importance of understanding both, and that we're not trying to run away from the human world. Like, our objective is to pull both of these beautiful experiences together, and to hold space for both and work with both and understanding of both.
Mhm.
So yeah, like it's really, and when you said that in your program's called integration too, I was like, yeah, we totally knew. I was like, I'm like, I feel like I know you from somewhere. You know,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. So
So
I
yeah.
did find it, and,
Yeah,
and
go
here
for
it
it.
is. And I live by this, though. To be fair, I fought it for a
Mm,
while, but
yeah.
now I would say I live by it because I understand. Well, that's the journey. We're understanding more all the time. But
Yes.
here's what he said. He said, finally, and this is in the context of like someone who wants to go up on the mountain, but the reason they want to go up on the mountaintop, like you said, isn't so much to convene with the divine as much as they realize, if I go up on the mountain, I don't have to wash dishes, I don't
Yeah.
have to go to work, I don't have to take care of my kids.
Mm,
And he's like, wait a minute, everyone, like, you're allowed to go up on the mountain, but finally you have to return to the world. And not just finally, but you have to work with the world. You have to relate with the world, because enlightened mind contains both wisdom, which you get at the top of the mountain, as well as compassion simultaneously. So you have an obligation to the world that brought you up, the world that you belong to.
mm.
And I take this very seriously. I am an American woman and I live in late stage capitalism.
Yeah.
And from a spiritual aspect, I have all sorts of sticking points about the system I live inside of and the culture I live inside of, and
Yeah.
why are things done this way, and so on and so forth. But rather than rejecting this broader community that I am not just a part of, but was born into and raised inside of, et cetera, et cetera,
Yeah.
I see it this way now, which is that as someone who has gone through the experiences I've had, as someone who spent a lot of time learning about spirituality and how to better my internal experience of reality,
Mm.
I actually have an obligation to bring this into the world that I'm a part of. So rather than living in a place where everyone, it's like, in my early 20s, I was like looking for the place where everyone thought the way that I did. So I was
Yeah.
looking for my crew or something. I thought I could find, if I went to some random city in Europe or something, everyone would kind of understand me and they would think exactly the same way I do or something. I was seeking an echo chamber.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I didn't find it, but I did learn that my sense of home and where I belong is internal,
Mm-hmm.
and that everywhere I was going, all over the world, I was bringing something with me. I was making a kind of contribution in a way to the people there and to the culture, in a different way everywhere I went. And I swore over my dead body that I'd ever move back to the place where I was born. Well, funny story, that's where I live now.
Yeah.
I live about a mile, a little less than a mile from the house I grew up in.
Wow.
I live 5 minutes down the street from my mom. I thought I would never, never, never come back to this place.
Yeah.
But when I did, it was a very intentional choice. My husband and I were weighing our options and saying, well, what is the right move here? But when we spent our time really listening to sort of what the magnetism of our hearts was telling us, there was just no question that
Yeah.
this was the right thing to do. And then the shape our lives have taken since we came here also makes it obvious this was right.
Right.
I was doing some journaling a few months after moving here, to sort of get my head on straight. I'm in a new place, I'm doing new things, I'm
Yeah.
not around the same people, and so on and so forth. and I'm journaling about like, well, what would my ideal day be? Like if I could just do what I like, and just kind of like have a day, what would it look like? And then I looked at the life that I had and realized I was like 85% of the way there, like that day.
Yeah.
And I wept because I didn't realize how close I was already. I just didn't, because I wasn't thinking about it. And when I actually put pen to paper and figured that out, I realized I only needed to make a few small adjustments to bring my full ideal into my daily reality.
Right.
And that was the beginning of me starting this integration program that I am doing now. So it was saying like I'm only a couple steps away from like my dream life.
Yeah.
It wasn't a big gap. It was like a few things, and that was a powerful exercise. But that also leads me to this other thing, which is about integration. So I moved to this place I swore I'd never return to because I'm trying to be a lighthouse, right? I'm trying to bring it with me and say, even if I don't know who here needs this, I know somebody does. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Yes. Thank you for that one.
Right. But then when it comes to integration, it's about putting these two things together, having the sort of spiritual, well, I'm the scientist and the spiritual person, right? It's like you're putting it all together. And when we talk about people who are very up here on the mountaintop and super spiritual and trying to ignore the physical, well, you also have people who are very material and very physical and aren't doing much up here either. Integration is really about knitting all of it together so that it is one path. We treat, spiritual stuff and material stuff like it's separate. It's not. No. We make it separate. Yes. But you will find as you work on your own integration practice that the physical is spiritual through and through. It is the medium through which we are doing our spiritual work here now. Yeah. And in fact, it's our goal, everyone, to like bring this here. Yeah. How do we align the physical into its spiritual ideal? Right. And it's through what we do. It's through it's through our state of being. It's through the way we treat each other. It's through the way we collaborate. It's through the way we come to know ourselves more and more fully. We bring heaven to earth. We do. Yeah. It's not an external, something else is going to come do it. It's us. It's our job. Yeah. And I don't mean like me and you, Colleen. I mean like
the collective. All
everyone.
Of us.
Yeah.
Everyone. Yeah. Yeah. And I love the visual of that. When I channel, I get like the imagery and I see the imagery, and I love the conduit that brought forth that imagery into existence, because you can actually see the bridging of the gap of like the pulling of the energy down through you and it's that remembering, like you've already mentioned, the remembering inside of us. It's not outside having to become something else. It's remembering who you actually are inside of you and that power. Now, like there's a couple ways I want to take this, but I want to ask this question because it's kind of looming. So someone who's very pragmatic, like if you look at yourself, well, you were always questioning and and I was the same way. Like I was just like you, very science driven, very math driven in school, but I always had this ghost ESP. And like when you said at the beginning, I was like, we're like spirit sisters. Like that's like the journey. But I'm not an astrophysicist. I wanted to go into forensic detective science. But then when I got to university, I was like, fuck this, I'm not staying here that long, like I was like, I'm out of here. Like for me, I was like,
it takes a long time.
Yeah, the academics I couldn't hold. And I understand now why, because my mission is totally different and complete. Like if I would have went that way, I would have been like way out. But I would have awakened to wherever through the way anyways, because it was
a different path. But
different path for sure. But like if there's people listening that are moving through, okay, so they have an understanding, they know they're a spiritual being and they have a soul in this body, and they're like discovering this, let's say, but they have a very pragmatic, very maybe scientific engineering, they're in very pragmatic business structures or careers. what would be like something that you would say to them as they're moving through this journey? I just feel like there's some insight you have that could help them like break that open.
Yeah, so I celebrate skeptics because discernment is really important for each individual. And things can go very sideways very quickly when you are very motivated in a spiritual direction but don't have any discernment. I mean, I've seen people lose their life savings to scam artists and all end up in something like a cult. And a lot can happen when you don't exercise your discernment. So I think skepticism is healthy, and I think no matter how spiritual you are, you need those skills. It's a skill set. However, this is almost a, I'll be honest, I have been very slowly working on a book about this for about a year, because there are many people that I love dearly in my life that are like the person you're describing. So they're aware that their consciousness is something worth attention. Yeah. And that shifts in their consciousness have meaningful impact in their daily life. But they're skeptical about like the sort of spiritual nature of that. So they're thinking about it more in a material way. Like, when I shift my consciousness, I'm shifting my focus. So that's why my experience is different. And I'm like, well, that's true. I mean, that is true. So like, cool, let's just work with that. And that's my take on this, is that you actually don't have to believe anything. As long as we can work from the base assumption that shifts in your consciousness create shifts in your experience. I don't need to tell you that a shift in your consciousness changes reality, or like is magical in some way. That's actually not important. Changing your internal experience, that on its own is going to change the way you feel. It's going to change the way you perceive and interpret the things that happen to you. It's going to change the way you treat other people. It's going to change the way you make decisions. So that shift in your consciousness is going to change your reality, even if it's only through the shifts in your own self. Like, it doesn't mean you manifested a car. Like, but I mean, you can, but it's like, you can also do that just by saving up for it and buying the car. There, you manifested it. It's, cool. Right. But, that's my point, is that the mechanism actually isn't this. All the scientists are not going to like this. The mechanism isn't important. You also don't have to believe there even is a mechanism. I say the proof is in the pudding. Try these practices, try these shifts in perspective, and then keep track of what's happening in your life. Document it, journal it, and then you can go back with the data that you have collected and see, have these changes in my perception, or have these shifts, or have these practices I've taken on, have they changed my life in a meaningful way, or have they changed my experience in a meaningful way? And I think the answer is always going to be yes. So I don't have hard and fast beliefs about like a universal framework or something, because I am very open to new information. My beliefs and my sort of framework that I work from have changed over time, and they will change again in the future as I learn more, as I gain more experience, as I learn from other teachers, as my phase of life changes, so I think it's important not to be too concrete. But I say that to the skeptics too, like, don't be too concrete. Be ready to take the data available to you and make an assessment about what's helpful in your life. You don't have to go out and like be a preacher and tell everyone this is the truth. But what I do tell people when I'm doing facilitation and running my programs is, this was my experience and this is what worked for me. You are going to have to experiment to figure out what is actually going to do the same for you, but it's understanding what the goal is. The goal is this improvement of your internal experience. Are you handling life better? Are you enjoying life more? Are you having more enriching experiences and relationships? Like, that's what we're doing. We're trying to human better. So these are just tools to do that. And then wherever you go from there, that's sort of a springboard to many other things. But that's where I sit. I sit at that interface for people who are just kind of getting on their spiritual journey in a way, or they're like spiritual curious, and we kind of work from there and say, okay, well, let's start with making our internal experience better. It then impacts all the people around you, you know, and starting that ripple effect. And then it's like whatever light that person is shining, it's going to go off on its own. It's like, I don't, yeah, the idea is sort of giving people a platform to kind of find their feet, figure out what works for them. And then, you know, go live your integrated life, go be the light for other people, you know, and provide for others by just shining. It's like there's very little you have to actually do or teach.
Yeah.
Most of what we do teaches by example anyway, just by being it rather than right.
And that's like I hit this home consistently all the time. It's like sometimes we look for this massive, bigger purpose. And some people, you know, they're meant to be on stages speaking to 10,000 people, doing that impact and moving that energy through. But like a purpose could be that you wake up every day and wherever you go, you smile at people at the grocery store, when you're getting your coffee. And that beacon of light is what the ripple effect is meant to move through the world. Like, and each person lit up in their whatever avenue, like they healed their trauma, they believe in themselves, you know, their relationships are amazing, they love their kids in a different way because of the fact that now that they're aligned, or whatever verbiage we want to put behind it. But that imprint is what is like what we're actually desiring in the world, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm like getting emotional listening to you because I'm like, amen, sister. Yeah. Yes. I because of the nature of decisions, I think it's really interesting to say something like someone is meant to be on stage or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I do think we all have purpose. I think our purpose is collective, though. And individually, we have certain gifts and talents and interests and stuff that kind of guide us. But because we get to make choices, you don't have to do any of those things. You like, even if you are sort of like designed in a way to get on stage, you can say no to that and be a barista, you know. Like it doesn't, it's actually not important. And that's kind of the point I was thinking about your alternate path as a forensic scientist, because it's just another way. It's important to be cognizant that all roads lead up like different mountain, but like all roads lead up the mountain, right? And it's another reason why I'm not anti-religion. I'm not really anti anything. I'm not really anti making really bad choices, because that's just another way for you to get up the mountain. And even people making really poor choices, they wouldn't make those choices if they didn't need the lesson that's going to come out of that. So all roads lead back to whatever you want to talk about, source or unification or collective consciousness or love, however you want to talk about it. We're all going there anyway. I prefer going on a more intentional road that says I understand the process I'm a part of and I want to engage with it. But the truth is, you know, I think about it like, I think it was C.S. Lewis who talked about this. Like, if we think of ourselves like a big hunk of marble, and our spiritual work is us chipping away at that hunk of marble to reveal the beauty and perfection within in the form of a sculpture or what have you. That's the metaphor. But chipping away at this rock sounds a little painful. And that was the point he was making, is that it hurts to grow and it hurts to perfect oneself. Now, we can be this very intentional artist, you know, chipping away and sort of revealing the form, the ideal form that we see for ourselves. Or you can throw yourself down the mountain and let every impact as you fall down the mountain slowly chip away too. So like, that's another way. And I do know people who choose that path. It's also an effective path. I just think it's not as intentional, could be a little more like painful, like throwing yourself down the mountain, you know, given you're a hunk of marble, is like another way to do this. It's just not the way I want to do it. I spent sort of my teens and 20s trying that one. And then I was like, oof,
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish this on anyone,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep, me too.
But it had helped chip away big parts that that needed to be gone, so that I could kind of dust myself off and be like, I'm gonna try something else now.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
Grace and ease, baby, is like the words. I'm like, we did the narrow winding roads, like I'm like, I went down the dark valleys. I chose,
Yeah.
and I purposely chose against my intuition for most of my life. So I was
Uh-huh.
like, no, I'm gonna go this way instead. So imagine, the circumstances, the different storylines that dropped in because of the fact that I was not living in grace and ease, because I wanted the badge of honor of like, look at how much I struggled to get here. Like that was a
Yeah.
thing, and back when I was 23 and I read my first personal development book, that's all you kept hearing and reading was like, it's got to be hard and you sleep on the floor and you work 24, like all of like that was the
Yeah.
stories everywhere, right? And then one day I was like, screw this. I'm no
Well, it's
longer
very
doing it this
masculine.
way.
That's a very masculine path, and
Yeah.
we live in a still very masculine culture. So I think
Mhm.
that's only natural.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the people writing those books, they come to that wisdom honestly, and they
Of
do believe
course.
that's what is necessary. But that's just, again, I'm like, it's just one way. Like, I get that
Yes.
that's their way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like well, it's like, this is why I think we like recognized each other. I totally
Yeah.
resonate with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I also fought my intuition for many years, but I didn't fight it because I thought I needed a hard time. I
Yeah.
fought it because I was fighting for my free will. So I was
Oh,
like, I hear
yes.
you.
Yeah.
I want to do it my way.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah,
it was
okay.
about, right, it was about control, and it
I
was
love
about
this.
like hearing the call loud and clear, but rejecting that because I was like, I want to do these other things. I don't want to do like this thing I'm being called to. Like, oh no, like I want to, I want to shape my experience. I want to like choose the path that and but I have to say I didn't get it, and I had a huge I don't even know what to call it. I had a moment. I had a pretty big moment. This was in my late 20s, so I was finally getting the message. Um, you know
Me
what
too.
I'm talking
28.
about.
It took me to
Yeah,
28 and then I started
yeah. So yeah,
listening.
it was like 27 to 28 was like
Yeah.
the magic time. I was really starting to get it. But I had this sort of deep, dark place that I went through where I had to like give up. I had to give up fighting the call.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was realizing in that moment that the work, while we're here, the work is never done. Because I think I
Yeah.
had this idea that once I did my healing and engage with my spiritual work, that I would like be enlightened and then I'd just be like cruising.
Yeah.
But then I realized that
Totally.
that was not right. I
Yeah.
realized that was not right. And I was like, no, as long as I'm here in the physical,
Yeah.
the work's not over. In
Yeah.
fact, even when I'm not on the physical, it may still not be over. There's like a long road ahead
Yeah.
of continuous I didn't know exactly what it was, but I when people say do the work, like
Yeah.
we know what we're talking about. And
Yeah.
when I realized that it was sort of this almost like infinite thread before me of doing the work forever, I thought about it almost like it's a 9 to 5, where it's like I can never retire.
Yeah.
Like, oh, why? Why? You know,
I always give this visual of like you birth into the world and they give you this onion and then it's the never ending onion. Like you keep peeling it and it never gets to the middle. Like you're just always
right. Yeah.
peeling
Oh
more
my
layers.
gosh.
And you're like, shit, who gave me this onion? How did I even get this here?
Oh
Like
my
I want to
God.
return this,
That
like,
is
yeah,
so funny.
yeah,
But you have to get to the other side of that. And it's like, if
yeah,
that's where you are in this moment, dear
yeah,
listener, like you will move through it and
yeah,
understand that it's not a 9 to 5. Like your spiritual work is not a 9 to 5. In fact, you can have so much flexibility around how you do it and the pace that you do it.
yeah,
And you can kind of you move to a place where you actually get to kind of pick the stuff you want to work on, and like external world will present you with stuff that it's like, no, you better work on this stuff, and you're like, okay, I will, but I will pick this other thing too, because we're always expanding like in all directions. There's not just one thing to work on ever.
yeah,
There you get to kind of engage with it until it starts being enjoyable. I think what
yes,
I missed in the early days is that when you're at the beginning of this, a lot of times it can be super hard and dark because you're working through a lot of trauma and baggage and conditioning, and all that stuff is like hard stuff, but it's not hard like that forever. So like here I am, I'm like 10 years past this point, and it's not that difficulties don't arise, and it's not that we don't get new traumas in life where we have to learn to let go of attachments and stuff. But I got to tell you, like the way I handle it today and the way I experience my emotions today couldn't be more different than it was back then. So it gets easier. Even though the things happening to you, it's life still happens, like stuff still happens, but it's like how you experience it is really transformed. So you don't stay in that deep, dark place, and the work isn't always hard. It's just a part of your life. It's a part of who you are. It's a part of how you handle things. It's a part of how you treat other people. You move into a place where it's happening all the time, every day, not because you have to, and not because like it's work. It becomes who you are. That's how you are shining in the world, is by using this this opportunity, your life as an opportunity to become, and being in this perpetual process of becoming. And like, how has the universe rewarded me? Well, I mean, it's I have very deeply loving relationships. I have beautiful friendships, also very loving. Everything feels figure outable. And what I put out into the world is reflected back. I'm not interfacing with a lot of really like difficult or oppositional people. I'm ready to listen. So the people that are attracted to me are also ready to listen. I'm ready to share and collaborate. So the people being attracted to me are also ready to share and collaborate. So it's like, this is sort of like law of attraction stuff, but it's because you are changing. The stuff in your life that doesn't vibe with that does pass away, and stuff that vibes with more where you're at does come in. And it's easier to take this kind of radical responsibility because it becomes a joy. And you're like, I'm happy to take on this responsibility and to live with intention, because I know now, instead of me in my 20s where I'm like, I want to shape my life, is instead like I am accepting of what life is bringing, but I'm shaping my experience. So the thing that I'm like working with, like this sort of like fluid, slippery clay, is how I'm handling and how I'm interfacing, and how I can be with my emotions without like sitting in a bathtub of emotions. It's like they become weather. So it's like I watch the storm go by, and sometimes I can even sit in the rain of the storm and be like, well, I needed this. I needed this expression. I needed this purge. You know, like let the rain come. Like this is what this moment requires. So you're like sitting with something that on the surface looks hard, but within you're still at peace. So you know, all of these things are really about shifting that, and then it makes space for the people around you to start having that too. So like having a heart of service is like a huge part of this for me, because I learned very early in my spiritual journey, it's not about me. It's like I'm here for everyone else, just like they're also here for everyone else. Like we are in it together. We're all sitting in the stew. You know. So.
Such a great perspective. And I'm in the same boat as you in that energetics. Like, and I talk to people always about awareness. You know, it's like we get more tools as we move through, and we just see things differently. It doesn't mean that we stop the human journey. Like we still have the challenges that show up or the new levels of learning, but we just have this different viewpoint on it. So now we go, okay, this is happening. What do I need to do? Do I sit here, just like you just said, and let the rain come down? Or are we purging? Are we in the meat of it? Am I moving this through really quick? Is this just, hey, remember us? And be like, yo, dude, what's going on? You know, and like you're floating through it again. And it just brings in this whole new level. And it's like the escalation almost of the being able to see through the veils, you know, and see through the illusion of it. And then being able to remember, oh yeah, I remember like a couple years ago, you went through the same thing. What did I do again? Boom, boom, boom. And then you can move through it and potentially change that dynamic as well, moving in the world. But yeah, it's cool.
Like, Colleen, you're so practical.
I know. I actually have this like gift, and I think like, I came down to earth with a backpack full of like multi-talented things because of the fact that I knew I was going to be put through some different experiences and would need some tools. And one of those tools is being able to take like a concept that is like super vast and be able to short form it and deliver it like in accuracy. It's like super easy for somebody to like comprehend and take a bite out of, on purpose, because there's a lot of stuff like, your scientific brain can go into 500 million places and this big concept, and you're like, all of this is connected by that, and I'm able to go. And I think you have this gift as well, which you have both abilities, which I think is so cool. But mine is like, okay, I hear all of you, how do I give this to them like this, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
well, you're going to save people so much time by being able to be so concise. Well, and it's not just being concise, it's also having your approach is very much like what is happening, what are the resources available, and like mix them together, and like how do I do this? And I think that's actually really helpful for people that, I mean, especially people who might be in crisis, because it's like they don't need all the fluff.
Yeah.
They need a plan,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's really beautiful. When I think about, there's like one thing there's like a seed I want to plant in here though, because it's like your response to, it's like external life happens.
Yeah.
Though, I mean, I'd argue it's like how much is external, but that's like a metaphysical discussion. But it's like life happens.
We love
and you're like,
metaphysical
okay,
discussions too. Yeah.
right. Like, what do I do with this? And this is a concept that I am playing with and still working on, because my issues, as I discussed, my big stuff that I'm working on has always been about control. As I was saying before, when I was in my 20s, I wanted like a firm grip on every step forward in my life. And I love the concept of being a co-creator with the universe, because it's just a much more balanced way of being. So being like a doer and having really firm control on like every step of the way, being a hard worker and like all that type of stuff is very like masculine energy stuff. There's nothing bad about that. Then there's the feminine side, which is more passive and receptive, and is able to create through natural processes. You don't have to do anything. Just letting nature take its course is creative from the feminine side. However, you can be imbalanced on that side too, and just become very passive in a sense where it's like, let's say you're a gardener, but you're entirely feminine, you're going to have a field full of weeds. Letting nature take its course, right? So you might get something to eat, but you're also going to get a lot of chaos and stuff you can't eat too. So there's like, and then there's like the gardener, which is like, like the French palace gardens, which is like perfectly manicured and in rows, and everything's like 6.5 inches apart and stuff like that. So it's like those are the two extremes. But the mix is like a little bit of both. It's almost, and this makes me think about permaculture in a way, which is that you learn about the natural laws and the ways that nature can take its course, but you're also making decisions about what should be growing in this little plot of land that you have at your disposal. So if your human experience is the garden, you want to be able to rely on the climate and the rain and the soil to do what it can do without your interference. But you're making some decisions and also performing some stewardship too. So you're like, I know what I would like to plant, but I'm only going to plant the stuff that's going to work in my climate zone. So it's like, I know I'm not going to be a professional basketball player. I'm not going to sow those seeds now in my life. Okay. Like that's not going to grow here. So, but I'm going to choose what's appropriate with the plot of land and the weather and what I know about this. I'm going to choose what's appropriate to grow. And I'm going to let nature, I'm going to plan it in such a way that nature can kind of take its course so that it's like, I love the term like stewardship. So I'm like a steward of my life experience rather than like, you don't have this like grip of control, and you're also not just like whatever happens, man. And it's like, that's how you wind up in some really difficult situations. Like you don't want to just let there's a balance. It's a balance between the intentionality and the action
Yeah.
and rolling with nature in flow. So this is alchemy, by definition almost, which is like
Yeah.
taking both together, integrating them, so that what you're getting is the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
You are a steward of something that nature
Mm-hmm.
can provide most of the support there, and you're just like curating when you need to, and like helping when help is needed. Like it's a different
Yes.
kind of role
Yeah.
than that. I don't know. There's a lot of talk about like manifestation in
Mm-hmm.
our
Yeah.
industry that is like this kind of gripping masculine, like we lay back and let the universe do it, but I'm in total control of what I'm manifesting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, come on guys, like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's another
I
way
get
to
you.
do this that is more balanced, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it does require some effort and intention on your part, so like be prepared
Take an
to do
action.
something, to
Yeah.
contribute. You got to contribute,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
and then also to be open to like new things that can come. So like in a
Yeah.
permaculture garden, sometimes you get volunteers, which are
Yeah.
plants that have seeded themselves and are growing just fine on their own. And it's
Yeah.
like, maybe I didn't plan to have a banana tree there, but it's doing just fine.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it,
Yeah.
So it's in the same way. It's like people come in and out of our lives that we may not have intended or tried to seek them out or
Yes.
something, but it turns out to be a wonderful gift. So like
Yeah.
be receptive to that, be open to that. So
And I like I always lead in this conversation of like we have a desired life. We have a feeling of what we desire. We have a movement of certain things that we want, like the love relationship. We may not know it's that person, but we hold an energy of what do we want to feel like? What does this look like? And maybe you have a desire to live on the beach or in a forest or whatever. Like you've got some of these things percolating and you can see it in your mind and you can feel it in your body. And now when you wake up every day, it's listening to the call of how to take an action and move it forward. And for some people that are very pragmatic and they need to-do lists, sometimes their to-do list isn't actually leading them down the pathway of what they actually desire. They're doing it out of a mechanism, like the masculine side that you said in the control aspect. Whereas there is going to be an action that needs to be taken. We have to blend both worlds of that feminine, like you just described beautifully, the garden, like the feminine energy of the embodiment and feeling and seeing it and like understanding kind of the scope, and the masculine steps in alignment to actually take the action when it keeps dropping. Like maybe make that call. Why don't you go for that walk, or go visit that property, or whatever it is that's moving through you to maneuver. And I love that you brought that up. And it's so funny because I'm in Costa Rica. So we obviously have native plants and fruits and everything that grows here. And my girlfriend hired a permaculturist for their land to come, and they're putting seeds in certain spots on the land that are going to do better in certain spots. And they're, consulting them with different things that they can do. And then they're going to build a greenhouse. And she says to her partner, he's like, well, I want to have red peppers in it, and she's like, that's not from the land though. And they were having this discussion. He's like, but I really love red peppers, like, so it's like this exact like conversation in my mind that's been happening in real time for them, that you're like literally speaking to. And obviously the
so
cat's
funny.
awake right now. She's just like running around, but she loves high vibrational spiritual talk. Like when I do light language, she's like right beside me, in the space of it. So
Yeah.
she's right now active. So whatever we're talking about, she's like, yes, this is like an energy I want to be a part of. So
Yeah.
cute. Yeah.
Well, it's like I definitely I feel for that. I feel for that. Like, but man, I really want the peppers.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like been there.
Yes. And it's just fun to actually see it too, and the viewpoint of seeing it. So cool. I know that you and I could speak forever about 500 million things. I definitely just want to touch on, because we're almost at an hour already, which is crazy. I want to touch on Dolores Cannon, because I think this, like, her energy is so cool, and the vibration she brought to earth, and the opening and expansion of some of the tool sets she has gifted, people in the earth experience. So I'd love for you to talk about your relationship with her, the mechanism of the hypnosis that and wherever you want to go, because I don't even know your connection.
Yeah. So most people know Dolores Cannon through like YouTube, but she's such an interesting person. She passed about like 10-ish years ago now.
Yeah.
But she was a military wife who spent the first part of her life, raising kids and so forth. But then she spent the second half of her life as a transpersonal hypnotist, and she developed a specific technique called quantum healing hypnosis technique, which it sits sort of under the umbrella of transpersonal hypnosis, but it's an incredibly powerful healing method that uses the tools of hypnosis. So what's interesting and unique about this method, most people are familiar with healing like Reiki or energy healing or whatever, and this is not that. So people who practice her method are not healers. We're facilitators. And what happens during the a session using QHHT is that the client essentially becomes a channel for their own higher self, who comes through them, speaks, and provides clarity and healing and helps them integrate any lessons that they're having difficulty integrating. And this can be helpful in almost every area of your life, whether it's mental or emotional, also physical. So people talk about the placebo effect, like nothing's going on. And I'm like, if you think nothing's going on, you don't understand what the placebo effect is. It's not saying that you're being tricked. It's saying that the body can heal itself if the belief is there. And that is how QHHT works. It works with the belief system of the client to create alignment between the ego, the spirit, and the body, so the body can heal.
Yes, I love it.
And it's very powerful. I'm a level 2 practitioner myself. I have had clients avoid surgery. I have had them heal abscesses. There's like all sorts of interesting things that have occurred in my sessions. Most of the people I work with, though, aren't coming to me for physical problems. Most of them come to me because they've already been on the spiritual path, and there's like a few blind spots that they can't access themselves, which is where the hypnosis helps, because it gets the ego out of the way so that the deeper roots of a behavior can come out and we can talk about it. So they discuss it, it gets recorded for them. And then what happens is after the session, they listen to the recording when they're sort of back in their awake, aware, problem-solving ego self. And that's where the magic actually happens. Because when you are under hypnosis, the ego comes up with a lot of excuses for why we don't believe anything that was said. But when you're awake and you're listening to it later, the ego can't run away. It's coming through in your own voice, from your own channel, your own high self, with the truth that you probably already know in your body but haven't been able to recognize yet. And then it connects everything there. So once the ego then becomes savvy to all this underlying information, that's where you can reach really good alignment. So I do practice this technique, but only in person. Dolores taught that it can only be done in person. It does take all day. So it's like, even if she said online was cool, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be with someone for like 6 hours on Zoom. So, but yeah, she was an incredible teacher, something that not everyone knows that listens to her lectures on YouTube. She was not a channel. She was not psychic. All of the information she shares came through her clients while they were under hypnosis, and she would just give talks sharing what they discussed. And it covers everything from like the afterlife to our purpose here on Earth to our place in the universe and what we are trying to do on this planet and in the future of humanity. It's like kind of whatever topics or any metaphysics you're interested in, you can probably find a lecture from Dolores Cannon that talks about those things. And I found her actually right at the beginning of my PhD, actually. I was dealing with PTSD symptoms. I had been to therapy for a long time. I totally understood everything. Like intellectually, it was all unpacked. And I was like, I get it. Why do I still have symptoms though? And I finally got tired of waiting and was like, somebody can help me. And I was sort of willing to try anything. And I found, a trained practitioner who lived, 40 minutes from my house. I had never heard of this stuff, but again, I was like, I'll try anything. And I just went. I was going to go for one session, be like, we'll see. But in one session, my symptoms got handled and they never returned.
Yeah, love it. Was it past life related?
No, current life. Yeah, definitely current life related.
Cool.
But I mean, the short version is that I was still having PTSD symptoms because I was holding on to and nurturing my own guilt around the situation, even
Yes.
though it wasn't actually mine. It was
Yeah.
time to let it go. It was never about me, actually. But I was like nurturing it because I felt like it would mean something bad about me if I didn't have guilt or something. Yeah. But it got handled in one session, never came back. I was like fully evangelized because I was like, this should be healthcare. If one session can do this, it should be healthcare. Everyone should have access to this. Everyone should know about it. And I'm the type of person that I'm like, well, if no one else is doing it, I'm just going to do it. So I just went and trained and started working with clients. And I guess that was almost 6 years ago now. But it's funny because this journey in sort of creating a spiritual practice and business has been very hand in hand with my astrophysics PhD, almost on the same timeline, actually.
Wow, so cool.
You know, there you have it.
Yeah.
But if you're interested, her lectures are all over the internet and you can go pretty deep down the rabbit holes.
Oh my God, you totally can. The Dolores Cannon rabbit hole is actually a thing for sure.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge. So like get ready. And also if you come across something you're not ready for, just like turn it off. You know, like just stick with what you're comfortable with. You know, it took me probably a couple of years to kind of get through her whole body of work, mostly because some of it I was like, I cannot like I can't do this right now. But it's interesting. And I would just say take it with a grain of salt also, because as time went on and she was working with different clients, a lot of the stories began to change. And one of the ways, well, even during the time I've been practicing, clients and what they are saying and learning has been changing too. And it's because the collective is shifting. We are taking a different path, and things that we were headed towards 20 years ago, we're not now.
Yes.
People have made different choices. We are on a different timeline. So, I'm like, check it out, see what you think. Every QHHT practitioner has a different focus. We're all different people, right? So for some people, they're very into like new earth and the future and stuff like that. Again, the focus of my practice is how do we human better? So like I'm here to improve lives and to help serve people in that way. And so those are the types of clients that come to me.
Yeah. And I love that. And I know a couple of years ago, I'd looked on their website, and are all the practitioners there? Because I knew at the time that you had to do the work in person, which I feel is still a vibration. You mentioned it, but I'm like, I still feel that that's a thing. Is everybody on their website that people can access?
So if you go to qhhtofficial.com, they do have a listing of practitioners there. They're not all active, but almost all of them are. Okay. So in the past, it was almost hard to tell, but they've implemented some new rules now so that the people on the website should be up to date. Their contact information should be up to date, and they should be actively practicing.
Yeah. Because like how would we find, obviously if people are out connecting locally, totally different, but like someone like me who moved to Costa Rica, and I was curious about this before, and I've never done a session. And I feel like I'm going to go look,
there are practitioners all over the world, literally all over the world. So I would definitely recommend looking there first. I would not be surprised if there are practitioners in Costa Rica at all.
Yeah, for sure now. And I'm going to be in Salt Lake City in September. So who knows, maybe there's so I'm just like open to the whole experience of all of it, and so I love this though. Like there's so many tools, so many ways that we can connect in, the objective I feel though, and I think that you would agree with me, is find where you are working best, like what works best for you, what feels more aligned, and roll with that and be open to that, and using your discernment when you're making decisions inside of that scope as well.
And trust yourself, because just because it's the right way for someone else doesn't mean it's the right way for you. So it's okay. Like, it's all right to say no to something if it's not, when it's aligned, because it feels like a magnet, it feels like a pull in your heart. Like it's not a mystery, but you just have to learn how to listen to yourself first. And it's like practice makes perfect. The more you listen to yourself, the better you get at knowing like when something's calling to you and when something's telling you like no way, you know. And you can just listen to the body's wisdom, because the body carries so much of the wisdom from your spiritual self, from your non-ego self, shall we say. That it's wonderful to create a collaborative being where the ego, which is an excellent problem solver, can work together collaboratively and in a healthy way with the other kinds of wisdom that you carry in your being. So.
I love that. And I think that that's a great way to kind of summarize some of the conversation we've been having today. We've hit all different spectrums, which I think is amazing, because when I read your bio even too, I was like, okay, this is going to be juicy. Like, I cannot wait to talk to Rosa today, like to just dive into some of this stuff. But if I were to pass you the baton just to leave like a completion here today, like what's on your heart to kind of share with whomever is listening? Yeah.
Sure. Well, if you're in North Carolina, which is a little East Coast state in the United States, I am local to Raleigh, and I will be at the Body, Mind, Spirit Expo. If you want to come meet me in person, I will be there. Come talk to me. My name is Rosa Hope. I also run an online integration intensive. We're finishing up the summer program now, but another program will be starting in September. So if you're interested in joining the wait list for that, or for just finding out more, you can go to rosa-hope.com and you can access all my stuff from there. I also offer occasional in-person and online workshops as well. So you can find everything through my website. I'm very active on Instagram, so definitely hit me up there at It's Rosa Hope.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll obviously have all the links in the show notes, guys. So you can go and grab the actual links and they'll be hyperlinked there for you to access Rosa. And yeah, so beautiful. I was literally on a call this morning with someone who's in North Carolina, who's new to North Carolina. Where she is in the state, I don't know, but I'm going to highly suggest that she makes it to Raleigh, you know, for that event. Absolutely.
Yeah,
But this is,
would
it's
love to
cool.
connect.
Yeah, it's cool to see how this is all coming together. So any last parting words that you'd like to impart on anyone?
I'll just say thank you for showing up and doing the work. Whoever you are, wherever you are, the fact that you're listening to this podcast means you're already doing it. So just try to enjoy the process as much as you can. It does not have to hurt. It can be fun.
Yes, thank you for that. And I always hit home on that conversation. I'm in a shadow program that I'm leading right now, and I go into Voxer all the time, and I'm like, guys, remember, you don't have to take on the emotions again. We're going in to get clues and bring in awareness. So, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember, you know. So I love that you completed almost this conversation. And Rosa, it's been a pleasure. And I'm so grateful that you are here shining your light, that you said yes, that we're connected in this space of time. And yeah, guys, I'm just going to encourage you to reach out to her and, you know, help us share the podcast out, help us spread the energy, and we will see you guys all in the next podcast.
Yeah.
Right, guys? Like, wasn't that just such a beautiful episode? And the way that Rosa like spoke about life and how she brought it all together, and, you know, the garden scenario and the permaculture and planting the seeds, and how we step into this level of like expansion within us, and the quest we are on as humans to be on the quest as humans. It was just such a beautiful, beautiful episode. So I'm just so grateful to share Rosa with you guys. Again, if you're feeling called to any of her work or just connect with her, her links are in the show notes. Please feel free to do that. And I'm highly suggesting you do that. As well as, you know, if you listen to this podcast and you were loving it, tag us on Instagram, share it out into the world, pass it on to a friend. Like I always say, it's like we cannot reach more people without having the literal, like all of us collectively coming together to reach more people. So each one of us is a beacon of light, and each one of us is in this world to shine that light so bright. And I'm just encouraging you guys to keep moving, keep doing that, share the wealth, share the energy, and let's go out, you know, and make this world exactly the dynamic world we know it to be in our hearts. And I'll see you guys all again soon.